In the vast darkness of space, where civilizations rise and fall like distant stars, there exists a truth that few dare to acknowledge. Sometimes the most extraordinary bonds are forged not between similar species, but between the most unlikely companions. When the Galactic Council declared the Luparian race extinct after their homeworld's destruction, they filed away another tragedy in their endless archives. But deep in the asteroid belt of the Kepler 442 system, a dying alien wolf clung to life in the wreckage of a crashed ship, waiting for a miracle that would come in the form of a grease-stained human mechanic who refused to let anything stay broken on his watch. This is the story of how humanity's greatest weakness, our stubborn refusal to give up on the lost and broken, became the catalyst for one of the galaxy's most legendary partnerships. It's a tale that would reshape interstellar politics, redefine what it means to be human, and prove that sometimes saving just one life can change the course of history itself. Marcus Chen had been salvaging in the asteroid belt for 7 years, and in all that time he'd learned to trust his instincts. When the proximity alarm on his modified freighter, the Rust Bucket, started pinging with an irregular pattern, something deep in his gut told him this wasn't just another chunk of space debris. He was 3 days out from Ceres Station, working a particularly rich field of metallic asteroids, when his sensors picked up an energy signature that didn't match anything in his database. The signal was weak, intermittent, like a dying heartbeat in the void. Marcus had seen plenty of wrecks over the years, merchant ships that had taken a wrong turn, military vessels from old conflicts, even the occasional pleasure craft whose owner had more credits than common sense. But this signature was different. It pulsed with a rhythm that seemed almost organic, as if whatever was generating it was alive. Marcus guided the Rust Bucket through the asteroid field with practiced ease. His ship wasn't much to look at, a patchwork of salvaged hull plating and jury-rigged systems that would make most engineers weep. But she was reliable where it counted. The main engine had been pulled from a decommissioned cargo hauler. The life support system came from a failed colony ship, and the sensor array was military surplus he'd traded for 3 months ago. Every component had a story, and Marcus knew each one intimately. As he navigated deeper into the field, the energy signature grew stronger. Through the reinforced viewport of his cramped cockpit, Marcus could see the asteroids tumbling slowly in the pale light of the distant star. Most were just rock and ice, but scattered among them were chunks of refined metals and rare elements that made this particular field worth the risk. Pirates occasionally swept through the area, and more than one salvager had vanished without a trace, but the potential profits kept drawing people back. The signal led him to a massive asteroid, easily 3 kilometers across, its surface scarred by impact craters and covered in a fine layer of metallic dust. As Marcus brought his ship closer, he could see something that made his breath catch. A section of the asteroid had been carved out, creating a natural hangar bay. And nestled within that bay, like a bird in a mechanical nest, was a ship unlike anything he'd ever seen. The vessel was sleek and organic-looking. Its hull formed from some kind of dark metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Strange curves and flowing lines suggested it had been grown rather than built, and Marcus could see damage along its flanks where something had torn through the alien hull plating. The ship was beautiful and terrible at the same time, clearly advanced but also clearly dying. Marcus ran his scanners over the vessel, trying to identify its origin. The design didn't match anything in the human databases, nor did it correspond to any of the known alien species that humanity had encountered in their brief time among the stars. The Galactic Council Species Registry was extensive, but this ship seemed to exist outside those classifications. What really caught his attention was the energy signature. It wasn't coming from the ship's engines or power core. Those systems were clearly dead. Instead, the signal originated from somewhere deep within the vessel's interior, pulsing with that same organic rhythm that had first attracted his attention. Marcus docked his salvage ship to the asteroid and began preparations for Eva. He'd explored countless wrecks over the years, but something about this one felt different. The silence was too complete, the darkness too deep. His hands moved automatically as he suited up, checking seals and testing comm systems with the ease of long practice. The magnetic boots clanked against the deck plates as he made his way to the airlock, and he paused for a moment to check his equipment. One last time. The cutting torch hung heavy at his hip alongside a basic medkit and emergency oxygen supply. Most salvagers went in armed, but Marcus had always preferred tools to weapons. In his experience, the real dangers in space came from faulty life support or structural collapse, not hostile aliens or pirates. Though looking at this strange vessel, he was beginning to wonder if his philosophy might need updating. The airlock cycled, and Marcus stepped out into the void. The asteroid's weak gravity was barely noticeable, requiring only occasional corrections with his suit thrusters as he crossed the gap to the alien ship. Up close, the vessel was even more impressive. The whole material felt warm beneath his gloved hands, despite having been exposed to the cold of space for who knew how long. Finding an entry point took nearly an hour. The ship's design was so foreign that Marcus had trouble identifying what might be doors or access panels. Finally, he located what appeared to be an emergency hatch near the stern, marked by symbols that might have been warning signs or operating instructions. The cutting torch made quick work of the securing mechanism, and with a gentle push, the hatch swung inward. The interior of the ship was even stranger than the exterior. Corridors curved in impossible directions, and surfaces that should have been walls seemed to flow into what should have been floors or ceilings. Emergency lighting flickered sporadically, casting dancing shadows that made navigation treacherous. The air had been vented to space long ago, forcing Marcus to rely on his suit's life support as he explored. He followed the energy signature through the ship's twisted passages, passing chambers filled with incomprehensible machinery and what might have been living quarters designed for a species that clearly didn't share human concepts of architecture. The ship felt like a maze, each room leading to 3 others in a pattern that defied logical mapping. It was in what appeared to be the ship's medical bay that Marcus found the source of the energy signature. At first he thought it was some kind of stasis pod or medical equipment. The device was roughly cylindrical, about 2 meters long, and covered in a crystalline material that pulsed with soft blue light. But as he approached, Marcus realized he was looking at something far more extraordinary. Inside the crystalline shell, suspended in some kind of fluid medium, was a creature unlike anything he'd ever imagined. It was roughly humanoid, but covered in what appeared to be fur or thick hair that shifted color in the pulsing light. The creature's limbs were long and elegant, ending in hands that bore 4 fingers tipped with what looked like retractable claws. Its head was elongated with a pronounced muzzle and ears that stood erect even in its unconscious state. But it was the creature's face that stopped Marcus cold. Even through the crystalline barrier and the strange fluid, he could see intelligence there. This wasn't some mindless beast or primitive alien. The bone structure spoke of high intelligence, and there was something in the creature's features that suggested nobility, even in unconsciousness. Marcus checked his scanner readings again. The energy signature was definitely coming from the crystalline pod, but the levels were dropping steadily. Whatever system was keeping the creature alive was failing, and failing fast. He estimated maybe 6 hours before complete power loss. For a long moment, Marcus stood in the flickering light of the alien medical bay, staring at the dying creature before him. Every instinct screamed that he should document the find and report it to the authorities. This was clearly a first contact situation, and there were protocols for such things. The Galactic Council would want to study the creature, catalog its species, and add it to their vast database of known life forms. But Marcus had spent enough time dealing with bureaucracy to know what would really happen. The council would take months to authorize an expedition. By the time they arrived, the creature would be long dead, just another specimen for their archives. They would poke and prod at its corpse, write detailed reports about its anatomy and probable origin, and file it all away under some clinical designation. The scanner readings showed power levels continuing to drop. 5.5 hours now. Maybe less. Marcus made his decision with characteristic directness. He'd built a career out of fixing broken things, and he'd be damned if he was going to let this magnificent creature die just because the proper authorities couldn't be bothered to move fast enough. The crystalline pod was roughly the same size as the emergency medical bay aboard his ship, and the rust bucket's power systems could easily handle the additional load. Moving the pod presented its own challenges. The crystalline material was clearly delicate, and Marcus had no idea what kind of shocks or environmental changes the creature inside could survive. But his years of salvage work had taught him how to move fragile cargo, and he had equipment aboard his ship designed for exactly this sort of situation. It took 4 hours to carefully extract the pod from the alien medical bay and transport it to his ship. Every minute felt like an eternity as Marcus watched the power readings continue to drop. By the time he had the pod secured in his own medical bay and connected to his ship's power grid, less than 30 minutes remained on the alien systems. The moment Marcus established the power connection, the change was dramatic. The blue light within the crystalline shell brightened, and the organic rhythm of the energy signature grew stronger and more stable. Whatever the pod was doing, it was working again. Marcus spent the next several hours studying the readouts and trying to understand the alien technology. The pod seemed to be some kind of advanced life support system, maintaining the creature in a state of suspended animation while simultaneously healing its injuries. His scanner showed massive trauma throughout the creature's body. Broken bones that had been reset and were knitting together, internal organs that showed signs of recent repair, and what appeared to be severe blood loss that was slowly being corrected. The creature had been dying when he found it, and the pod was bringing it back to life one cell at a time. As Marcus worked, he found himself studying the creature's face through the crystalline barrier. There was something hauntingly familiar about its features. Despite their alien nature, the elongated muzzle and pointed ears reminded him of the wolves he'd seen in nature documentaries from Earth. But the intelligence visible in its bone structure was unmistakably sentient. It was during his 3rd hour of observation that Marcus noticed the creature's eyes beginning to move beneath its closed lids. Rapid eye movement, suggesting dreams or perhaps a return to consciousness. The medical reading showed increasing brain activity, and Marcus realized with a mixture of excitement and terror that the creature was waking up. He checked the pod's status one more time. The power levels were stable. The life support systems were functioning normally, and the healing process appeared to be nearly complete. Whatever happened next, the creature would at least have a chance at survival. Marcus settled back in his chair and waited. In all his years of salvage work, he'd encountered many strange and wonderful things among the stars. But nothing had prepared him for this moment, the first meeting between a human and a member of a species that the rest of the galaxy had written off as extinct. Outside his ship, the asteroid belt continued its ancient dance around the distant star, and deep within the crystalline pod, something that should have been dead began to dream of life once more. The first sign of consciousness was a low vibration that resonated through the crystalline pod, so subtle that Marcus almost missed it. He'd been monitoring the life support readings for 6 hours straight, subsisting on coffee and stale ration bars while watching over his unexpected patient. The vibration came again, stronger this time, and Marcus realized the creature was trying to vocalize. The eyes opened slowly, revealing irises of deep amber that seemed to glow with their own inner light. For a moment, creature and human stared at each other through the crystalline barrier, neither moving, both trying to process what they were seeing. The creature's gaze was intelligent and alert, showing no sign of confusion despite its ordeal. It studied Marcus with the same intensity that Marcus was studying it, and there was something profoundly unsettling about being evaluated by such an alien intelligence. Then the creature spoke, and Marcus felt his worldview shift fundamentally. The voice came through his ship's communication system, somehow interfacing with the pod's electronics in a way that shouldn't have been possible. It was deep and resonant, with harmonics that suggested vocal cords designed very differently from human ones. But what stopped Marcus cold wasn't the alien nature of the voice. It was that he could understand every word. "I know what you are thinking, small one," the creature said, its amber eyes never leaving Marcus's face. "You are wondering how I can speak your language? The answer is simple. I cannot. But my pod can translate, and it has been listening to your communications channels since you brought me aboard your vessel." Marcus found his voice after a moment of stunned silence. "You're awake. I mean, obviously you're awake, but I didn't expect. How are you feeling?" The creature's expression might have been amusement, though it was hard to read emotion on such an alien face. I am alive, which is more than I expected when my ship was destroyed. You are the salvager who found me, yes? I owe you a debt that may be impossible to repay." "No debt," Marcus said quickly. "I couldn't just leave you to die." "What happened to your ship?" The creature's eyes grew distant, and Marcus could see pain there that had nothing to do with physical injuries. "Pirates! They attacked without warning, without provocation." "My vessel was not built for combat. It was a research ship, designed for peaceful exploration. We never had a chance." "We?" The pain in those amber eyes deepened. "I was not alone when this journey began. My packmates, they did not survive the attack. I barely managed to reach the medical bay before the life support failed entirely." Marcus felt a stab of sympathy. He'd lost people before, fellow salvagers who'd taken one risk too many or simply vanished into the dark between the stars. But losing your entire crew, everyone you'd traveled with, that was a special kind of hell. "I'm sorry," he said, and meant it. "What's your name?" "And what should I call your species?" The creature considered this for a moment. "My name is Kaelton of the Star-Touched Pack. As for my species, you would have difficulty pronouncing our true designation. Your translator is rendering it as Luparian, which seems appropriate given your own cultural associations." Marcus nodded slowly. The name fit. The creature's features definitely suggested canine ancestry, though evolved far beyond anything that had ever existed on Earth. "I'm Marcus Chen, and this bucket of bolts is my ship, the Rust Bucket. Not exactly luxury accommodations, but she's reliable." "Marcus Chen of the Rust Bucket," Kaeltan repeated, and somehow the alien pronunciation made his mundane name sound almost formal. "You have given me back my life. In my culture, this creates a bond that transcends species boundaries. Look, Kaelthan, I appreciate the sentiment, but I just did what anyone would do." "Well, what anyone should do anyway." Kaelthan's expression definitely suggested amusement now. "You misunderstand the nature of your galaxy, Marcus Chen. Most species would have taken my technology and left my body to drift in space. Some would have dissected me while I still lived, in the name of scientific advancement. Very few would have risked their own safety to preserve a life they did not recognize." The observation hit harder than Marcus cared to admit. He'd dealt with enough alien species to know that Kaelthan was probably right. The galaxy was full of civilizations that prioritized profit over compassion, knowledge over empathy. Even among humans there were those who would have seen the Luparian as nothing more than a valuable specimen. "Maybe," Marcus conceded. "But that's not how I was raised. My grandmother used to say that we're judged by how we treat the helpless, not by how we treat the powerful. Your grandmother was wise. Tell me, what do you know of my people?" Marcus hesitated. The truth was, he'd never heard of the Luparians before finding Kael'thon. But something in the alien's tone suggested that this might be significant. "Nothing, I'm afraid. Your ship design doesn't match anything in my database, and I've never encountered references to your species before." Kael'thon was quiet for a long moment, and Marcus could see him processing this information. "How long ago was your database last updated?" "About 6 months ago. I picked up the latest Galactic Council registry when I was last at Ceres Station." "Then you would not know," Kael'thon said softly. "The Council declared my people extinct 8 months ago after our homeworld was destroyed in a stellar collapse. I am likely the last of my kind." The words hung in the air like a physical weight. Marcus stared at the Luparian in shock, trying to process what he'd just been told. The last of his species, an entire civilization reduced to a single individual, kept alive by alien technology and the random kindness of a human salvager. "Jesus," Marcus whispered. "I'm sorry, I can't imagine what that must be like." "The pain lessens with time," Kael'thon said, though his voice suggested otherwise, "but it never truly fades. I have carried the weight of my people's extinction for 8 months now, wondering if there was any point in continuing to exist. Your arrival has given me an answer to that question." "What do you mean?" "I mean that perhaps there is still work to be done. My people were scholars and explorers. We dedicated our lives to understanding the universe and our place within it. If I am truly the last, then I must find a way to ensure that our knowledge survives, that our discoveries benefit the greater galaxy." Marcus was struck by the determination in Kael'ton's voice. Here was a being who had lost everything: his homeworld, his family, his entire species, and his first thought was about how he could contribute to the greater good. It was humbling and inspiring at the same time. "The pod seems to be working well," Marcus observed, checking the medical readouts. "Your vital signs are stable and the healing process appears to be nearly complete. How much longer do you need to stay in there? The pod will release me when my injuries are fully healed. Perhaps another day, 2 at most. But I must warn you, Marcus Chen, harboring me may put you at risk. The pirates who destroyed my ship are still active in this sector, and they may be searching for survivors." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. What kind of pirates are we talking about? Raiders looking for easy cargo, or something more serious? "More serious," Kelthon confirmed grimly. "They called themselves the Iron Claw Syndicate, and they were not interested in conventional piracy. They were specifically hunting my people, seeking our biological and technological secrets. My research ship was targeted because of what we carried, not because of any material wealth." "What kind of research?" Kelthon hesitated, clearly weighing his words carefully. "My pack specialized in xenobiology and consciousness studies. We had made several breakthrough discoveries regarding the nature of sentient thought and its relationship to what humans might call the soul. The knowledge we possessed could revolutionize understanding of life itself, or be weaponized in ways that would horrify any ethical being." Marcus felt the pieces clicking together. "That's why they're hunting your people. Not for slaves or specimens, but for weapons research." "Precisely. The Iron Claw works for clients who have little regard for galactic law or common decency. They were hired to acquire Luparian research by any means necessary. When we refused to cooperate, they simply took what they wanted by force. The implications were staggering. If Kael'ton was right, then his rescue wasn't just about saving one life, it was potentially about preventing dangerous knowledge from falling into the wrong hands. And if the Iron Claw was still hunting Luparian survivors, then Marcus had just painted a target on his own back. "So what do we do?" Marcus asked. "I can't outrun military-grade pirates in this bucket, and I'm not exactly equipped for combat." "We run," Kelthon said simply. "But not blindly. I know their tactics, their ship configurations, their hunting patterns, and I have something they want more than any conventional cargo: the location of my people's hidden archives." "Archives?" "Before the stellar collapse, my people managed to evacuate our most important knowledge to a series of hidden facilities. The locations were known only to senior researchers like myself. The Iron Claw believes they destroyed all traces of Luparian civilization, but they are wrong." Marcus leaned forward, intrigued despite the danger. "You're talking about preserving an entire civilization's worth of knowledge. More than that, I am talking about ensuring that my people's discoveries reach those who will use them wisely. The research we conducted could benefit countless species, could advance scientific understanding by centuries, but it must not fall into the hands of those who would pervert it for destructive purposes." The weight of responsibility settled on Marcus's shoulders like a physical burden. A few hours ago, his biggest concern had been whether his salvage operation would pay for repairs to his aging ship. Now he found himself potentially holding the key to preserving the last remnants of an extinct civilization. "The archives," Marcus said slowly. "Where are they?" "Hidden throughout the galaxy in locations chosen for their obscurity rather than their strategic value. Old mining facilities, abandoned research stations, forgotten worlds on the edge of civilized space. My people were meticulous in their preparations." "How many archives are there?" 7 major facilities, each containing different aspects of our research. The complete picture requires access to all of them." Kelthon paused, studying Marcus intently. "I cannot compel your assistance, Marcus Chen. You have already done more than any being has a right to expect. But if you are willing to help me reach these archives, we could preserve something truly extraordinary. Marcus found himself thinking about his grandmother again, about her beliefs regarding how people should treat each other. He thought about the lonely death that awaited Caelthan if he refused to help, the last member of an ancient species dying alone among strangers. He thought about the knowledge that would be lost forever, the discoveries that could benefit the entire galaxy if they were preserved and shared responsibly. The decision was easier than it should have been. "I'm in," Marcus said, "but I should warn you. I'm just a salvager. I don't have military training or fancy equipment. If we're going to do this, we'll have to be smart about it." The expression on Caelthan's face was unmistakably gratitude, though the alien features made it strange to interpret. "You underestimate yourself, Marcus Chen. It takes more than advanced technology to build a ship like yours from salvaged components. You have the mind of an engineer and the heart of an explorer. Those qualities will serve us well." Outside the ship, the asteroid belt continued its eternal dance, indifferent to the momentous decisions being made within the hull of a patched-together salvage vessel. Marcus Chen and Caelthan of the Star-Touched Pack had just committed themselves to a journey that would take them across the galaxy, racing against time and ruthless enemies to preserve the last traces of a fallen civilization. Neither of them could have imagined where that journey would ultimately lead. Caelthan emerged from the medical pod 18 hours later, and Marcus got his first real look at the being he'd committed to helping. The Luparian stood nearly 7 feet tall, his frame lean but powerful, covered in thick fur that shifted between silver and deep blue depending on how the light struck it. His movements were fluid and precise, suggesting both grace and carefully controlled strength. What struck Marcus most was how alien yet somehow familiar Caelthan appeared. The elongated limbs and digitigrade stance were clearly non-human, but there was something in his bearing that reminded Marcus of the working dogs he'd known as a child, alert, intelligent, loyal to those who'd earned their trust. "The pod has completed its work," Caelthan announced, his voice now coming directly from his throat rather than through the translation system. The accent was unusual, with rolled consonants and elongated vowels, but perfectly understandable. "I am fully healed and ready to begin our journey." Marcus nodded, though privately he was still adjusting to the reality of his situation. Yesterday, his biggest concern had been whether he had enough fuel to make it back to Ceres Station. Now he was planning to traverse the galaxy with the last member of an extinct alien species, racing against pirates who wouldn't hesitate to kill them both for what they carried. "Before we go anywhere," Marcus said, "we need to talk logistics. My ship isn't exactly built for long-range exploration. The rust bucket can make it between systems, but barely. If we're going to visit 7 different archives scattered across the galaxy, we'll need upgrades." Caelthan tilted his head in a gesture that was somehow very dog-like. "What kind of upgrades?" "Better engines, for starters. Improved life support systems that can handle 2 different species for extended periods. Enhanced sensors to help us avoid trouble. And probably some kind of defensive systems, if what you told me about the Ironclaw is accurate." "Money," Caelthan said, understanding immediately. "You require funding for these modifications." Marcus nodded reluctantly. He hated asking for help, especially from someone who had already lost everything. But the math was unavoidable. The upgrades they needed would cost more than he'd earned in the past 2 years of salvage work. To his surprise, Caelthan seemed unconcerned. This should not be a problem. "My people were not without resources, and I have access to certain emergency funds that were established for exactly this kind of situation."
Emergency funds? Hidden accounts established by the Luparian Council before our homeworld's destruction.
They were intended to support any survivors who might need to operate independently in the aftermath of our civilization's fall. Caelthan moved to the ship's communication console with surprising familiarity. "With your permission, I will transfer sufficient credits to cover the necessary modifications." Marcus watched in amazement as Caelthan interfaced with the console, his fingers dancing over controls with practiced ease. Within minutes, the ship's account balance displayed a number that made Marcus blink in surprise. That's a lot of credits," he managed. "My people planned thoroughly for potential disasters. We understood that knowledge without resources is powerless." Kane Than stepped back from the console. I have transferred enough to cover extensive modifications plus operational expenses for a journey of several months. Use whatever you require. The amount was staggering, more money than Marcus had ever seen in one place. With those credits, he could transform the rust bucket from a barely functional salvage ship into something approaching a proper exploration vessel. The possibilities made his engineer's heart race. "All right," Marcus said, trying to process the sudden change in their circumstances. "We'll need to find a shipyard that can handle the modifications without asking too many questions. I know a place on Kepler 442b that should work. It's off the main trade routes, and the owner owes me a favor. How long will the modifications take? Depends on what we can source locally. 2 weeks, maybe 3 if we have to special order components." Marcus paused, struck by a sudden thought. "What about you? If the Iron Claw is actively hunting Luparians, won't you be at risk in any civilized system?" Keolthan's ears flattened slightly, an expression of concern that translated clearly despite the species barrier. "You raise a valid point. There are likely bounties posted for any Luparian survivors. I will need to alter my appearance somehow." Marcus considered this. "I might have an idea. The same shipyard that's going to modify our vessel also deals in, let's call it, identity modification services. They can set you up with biosynthetic disguises that should fool casual inspection. You speak of criminals. I speak of people who understand that sometimes the law isn't the same as justice," Marcus corrected. "Jake Morrison runs a clean operation. He just doesn't ask inconvenient questions about his customers' backgrounds." Over the next several hours, Marcus laid out their route to Kepler 442b and began planning the modifications they would need. The process was complicated by the fact that he had to explain human ship design to an alien engineer whose people had approached technology from a fundamentally different perspective. "Your power distribution system is remarkably inefficient," Keolthan observed as they reviewed the rust bucket schematics. "You route energy through multiple conversion stages when a direct neural interface would be far more effective." Neural interface. Luparian ships are grown rather than built. They respond to their pilot's thoughts and emotions, creating a symbiotic relationship between consciousness and machine. Your mechanical approach requires many more steps to achieve the same result. Marcus found himself fascinated by the implications. Could we adapt Luparian technology to a human-built ship? Possibly, but it would require significant modifications to your neural architecture, and the process is not without risks. My people spent centuries developing the interface protocols safely. The conversation was interrupted by an alarm from the ship's sensor array. Marcus rushed to the control panel, his heart sinking as he read the display. 3 ships had just emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the system, and their configuration matched military-grade pirate vessels. "Iron Claw?" Marcus asked, though he already knew the answer. Keolthan studied the sensor readings, his expression grim. "Yes, and they are scanning systematically, working their way through the asteroid field. They must have detected the energy signature from my pod during the rescue." Marcus's mind raced through their options. The rust bucket was fast for a salvage vessel, but these were purpose-built raiders with military-grade engines. In open space, they would be caught within minutes. But they weren't in open space. They were deep in an asteroid field that Marcus knew better than any pirate. "Hold on," he said, powering up the engines. "I'm going to show you why they call this bucket of bolts lucky." The next several hours were a terrifying game of cat and mouse through the asteroid field. Marcus used every trick he'd learned in 7 years of salvage work, threading the rust bucket through gaps that seemed impossibly narrow, using the sensor shadows cast by larger asteroids to mask their energy signature. The pirates were skilled, but they were hunting in Marcus's backyard. Keolthan proved to be an ideal partner during the chase. His enhanced senses could detect subtle vibrations through the ship's hull that indicated nearby asteroids, and his intuitive understanding of three-dimensional movement helped Marcus plot escape routes that would have been impossible to calculate manually. "There," Keolthan said suddenly, pointing to a particularly dense cluster of asteroids. That formation creates multiple overlapping sensor shadows. If we can reach it before they achieve visual contact, Marcus was already adjusting course. The maneuver required threading between 3 tumbling asteroids with less than 50 meters of clearance on each side, but it would put them beyond the pirates' ability to track. The rust bucket groaned under the stress of the tight turns but held together. They made it to the shadow zone with seconds to spare. Marcus killed all non-essential systems, leaving only passive sensors and minimal life support. Outside, the pirate ships continued their search pattern, unaware that their quarry was hiding less than a kilometer away. "How did they track us?" Marcus whispered, as if the pirates might somehow hear him across the vacuum of space. "The medical pod," Kael'thon replied quietly. "It transmits a unique energy signature that can be detected at considerable range. I should have warned you earlier, but I did not expect them to arrive so quickly. Can you disable the transmission?" "Already done. But the damage is complete. They know we are in this system. They will not leave until they are certain we have escaped or been destroyed." Marcus studied the tactical display, watching the search pattern of the 3 pirate vessels. They were being methodical, checking every possible hiding spot with the patience of experienced hunters. Eventually, they would reach the cluster where the rust bucket was hidden. "We need a distraction," Marcus murmured. "Something to draw them away from this area long enough for us to reach the hyperspace limit." Kael'thon was quiet for a moment, then spoke with obvious reluctance. "My ship, it still contains technology that they would find valuable. If we were to detonate its power core, that would work," Marcus agreed. "But it also means destroying the last physical remnant of your people's starships. Better destroyed than serving the Iron Claw's purposes. My ship contains navigation data that could lead them to other Luparian survivors, if any exist. I cannot allow that information to fall into their hands." The decision was painful but necessary. Marcus watched through his sensors as Kael'thon remotely activated his ship's self-destruct sequence. The explosion lit up the asteroid field like a brief star, drawing the pirates' immediate attention. Within minutes, all 3 vessels were converging on the blast site, leaving their route to open space clear. Marcus waited until the pirates were fully committed to investigating the explosion before powering up the rust bucket's engines. They slipped out of the asteroid field like a ghost, building speed toward the hyperspace limit while the Iron Claw ships were distracted by the wreckage of Kael'thon's vessel. "Jump coordinates locked in," Marcus announced as they reached safe distance. "Next stop, Kepler." 442B, the hyperspace transition was smooth, the familiar blue-white tunnel of folded space replacing the starfield outside. They were safe, at least temporarily, but Marcus could see the weight of loss in Kael'thon's posture. A Luparian had just destroyed his last physical connection to his people. "I'm sorry about your ship," Marcus said quietly. "It served its final purpose," Kael'thon replied, "and it bought us the time we needed to continue our mission. That is all any of us can ask for." During the 3-day journey to Kepler, 4.2b, Marcus and Kael'thon worked on detailed plans for their upcoming modifications. The Luparians' knowledge of advanced technology, combined with Marcus's practical engineering experience, produced designs that neither could have conceived alone. "Your idea for a hybrid navigation system is brilliant," Marcus admitted as they reviewed the latest schematics. "Combining human computational methods with Luparian intuitive algorithms should give us advantages that pure pirates won't expect. And your approach to modular defensive systems will allow us to adapt our capabilities to different threats." Kael'thon agreed. "My people's technology was advanced, but we rarely needed to consider combat applications." The partnership was evolving into something neither had anticipated. Marcus brought practical experience and innovative problem-solving to their planning, while Kael'thon provided theoretical knowledge and insights into technologies that humans were centuries away from developing independently. Together, they were creating something entirely new. When they finally dropped out of hyperspace near Kepler, 442b, Marcus felt a surge of optimism despite their circumstances. The Iron Claw might be hunting them, the archives they sought might be scattered across impossible distances, and the odds against their success were astronomical. But for the first time since finding Kale Thon in that asteroid field, Marcus believed they might actually have a chance. The rust bucket entered the planet's atmosphere with her usual lack of grace, but she held together. And in the cargo bay, the first member of a new kind of partnership prepared to step into an uncertain future, carrying the hopes of a dead civilization and the dreams of a stubborn human mechanic who refused to let anything stay broken on his watch. 3 weeks later, the ship that emerged from Jake Morrison's underground shipyard bore little resemblance to the battered salvage vessel that had limped in from the asteroid belt. The rust bucket had been transformed into something altogether more impressive, though Marcus had insisted on keeping the name as a form of protective camouflage. The modifications were extensive and elegant. The original hull had been reinforced with Luparian biometal alloys that could self-repair minor damage. The engines now incorporated hybrid technology that doubled their range while producing a fraction of the original sensor signature. Most importantly, the ship now featured a consciousness interface system that allowed Kale Thon to commune directly with the vessel's systems, providing intuitive navigation and threat detection capabilities that no human-built ship had ever possessed. Kaelton himself had undergone his own transformation. The biosynthetic modifications provided by Morrison's contacts had altered his appearance sufficiently to pass casual inspection, disguising his distinctive fur pattern and slightly modifying his facial structure. To most observers, he would appear to be a member of the Serenity Collective, a peaceful species known for their contemplative nature and scholarly pursuits. First archive is in the Vale Nebula, Kaysan announced as they departed Kepler 442b system, hidden within an abandoned mining facility on Kalara Station. My pack established it there 18 months before the stellar collapse, disguised as a geological survey operation. Marcus studied the star charts, noting the complex route they would need to follow. The Vale Nebula was contested territory claimed by 3 different factions but controlled by none. It was exactly the kind of place where ancient secrets might remain hidden, but also where 2 travelers might disappear without anyone bothering to investigate. What kind of information is stored there? Marcus asked as he plotted their hyperspace jumps. Biological research primarily. My people's studies into genetic manipulation, consciousness transfer, and organic technology integration, the kind of knowledge that could revolutionize medicine and biotechnology but could also be weaponized if misused. The implications were staggering. Consciousness transfer alone would represent a form of immortality, while genetic manipulation could eliminate disease and extend lifespans across species. But in the wrong hands, the same knowledge could create biological weapons capable of targeting specific genetic markers or enslaving entire populations. Their journey to the Vale Nebula took 4 days, during which they had ample time to test the ship's new capabilities. The consciousness interface proved to be even more effective than Marcus had hoped. When Kael'than linked with the ship's systems, the rust bucket responded to threats and opportunities with an almost living awareness. It's like the ship is thinking, Marcus marveled as they navigated through a particularly dense asteroid field. You're not just controlling it, you're communicating with it. The boundary between mind and machine becomes fluid when consciousness interfaces directly with technology. Kael'than, your ship is not truly alive, but while I am connected to its systems, it shares a portion of my awareness. The demonstration was impressive and slightly unsettling. When Kale Thon was interfaced with the ship, Marcus could feel a presence that seemed to permeate every system. It was as if the rust bucket had developed a personality, one that combined Marcus's practical engineering mindset with Kael'than's intuitive understanding of cosmic forces. They reached the Vale Nebula without incident, but their luck changed as they approached Kalara Station. The abandoned mining facility was exactly where Kael'than's coordinates indicated, but they weren't alone in the sector. 3 ships, Marcus reported, reading the sensor displays. Configuration suggests mercenary vessels, not military. They're running passive scans of the station. Kael'than's expression darkened as he studied the tactical readout. Iron Claw? They have traced the archive location somehow. How is that possible? You said the locations were known only to senior researchers. They were, but the Iron Claw has proven resourceful in extracting information from captured sources. Kael'than's voice carried a weight of implication that Marcus didn't want to examine too closely. The situation was delicate. The mercenary ships hadn't detected the rust bucket yet, thanks to their improved sensor masking, but approaching the station while it was under surveillance would be suicide. They needed a different approach. "Can you access the archive remotely?" Marcus asked. "The security protocols require physical presence and biometric verification. The data cannot be transmitted or accessed through external systems." Marcus considered their options. 3 mercenary vessels versus their single modified ship was poor odds, especially when they needed to actually board the station rather than simply destroy it. But perhaps they didn't need to fight the Ironclaw directly. "What if we don't try to sneak past them?" Marcus suggested. "What if we make them come to us?" Over the next several hours, they developed a plan that was equal parts cunning and desperate. Using the ship's enhanced communication systems, Marcus began broadcasting a series of coded signals that would appear to be routine salvage communications to casual observers. But embedded within those signals were subliminal patterns that Kael'than assured him would trigger aggressive responses in most predatory species. The effect was immediate. Within an hour of beginning the broadcasts, the 3 mercenary vessels had left their surveillance positions and were converging on the rust bucket's apparent location 60,000 kilometers from the station. Marcus had used the nebula's natural interference to make their signal appear to originate from an entirely different position. While the Ironclaw ships chased ghosts through the nebula, Marcus and Kael'than slipped into Kae'Lara Station through a maintenance shaft that barely accommodated their ship. The abandoned mining facility was a maze of industrial corridors and empty equipment bays, but Kael'than navigated it with confidence. "The archive is hidden within the Geological Survey Lab," he explained as they made their way through the station's defunct life support systems. Disguised as standard research equipment, they found the lab exactly where Kael'than remembered it, though 18 months of abandonment had left it thick with dust and corrosion. The archive itself was cleverly concealed within what appeared to be a mineral analysis computer, its true nature hidden beneath layers of fabricated geological data. Kael'than placed his hand on the biometric scanner, and Marcus watched in fascination as the device came to life, recognizing genetic markers that had been thought extinct for 8 months. Data streams began flowing across hidden displays as the archive connected to portable storage units they had brought for this purpose. "Downloading now," Kael'than announced. "This will take approximately 20 minutes. It was during the 15th minute that their stolen time ran out. The station's proximity alarms began blaring as the Ironclaw ships discovered their hiding place. Marcus could hear the sound of docking clamps engaging, followed by the distinctive hiss of cutting torches working on the outer airlocks. 5 minutes, Kael'than said, his calm voice contrasting sharply with the urgency of their situation. "I need 5 more minutes to complete the download." Marcus drew his cutting torch and positioned himself at the lab's entrance. "You'll have your 5 minutes," he promised grimly. The first Ironclaw operatives to reach the lab were expecting to find a defenseless research station, not a prepared defender in a tactically advantageous position. Marcus's years of salvage work had taught him to be resourceful with improvised weapons, and the cutting torch proved devastatingly effective in the confined space of the corridor. But more mercenaries kept coming, and Marcus was forced to give ground. By the time Kael'than announced that the download was complete, they were pinned down in the lab with Ironclaw forces controlling the only exit. "Emergency evacuation," Kael'than announced calmly, producing a device that Marcus had never seen before. Luparian technology includes certain dramatic solutions for dire situations. The device was roughly cylindrical and covered in the same crystalline material as the medical pod. When Kael'than activated it, reality seemed to twist around them. Marcus felt a sensation of movement without motion, as if he were being pulled through space by invisible forces. The sensation lasted only seconds, but when it faded, they were standing in the rust bucket's cargo bay. "Teleportation?" Marcus gasped, struggling to process what had just happened. "Quantum displacement," Kael'than corrected. "One of my people's more advanced technologies. The device is now depleted. We have perhaps 6 more uses before it becomes inert." They escaped Kaelara Station while the Iron Claw operatives were still searching for them in the lab. The mercenaries had no idea how their quarry had vanished, and by the time they thought to check the maintenance shafts, the rust bucket was already reaching the hyperspace limit. As they jumped away from the Veil Nebula, Marcus found himself grinning despite the danger they had just escaped. They had successfully retrieved the first archive, proving that their mission was possible. More importantly, they had demonstrated that the partnership between human ingenuity and Luparian technology could overcome odds that would have defeated either species alone. 6 more archives to go, Kealthan observed as they reviewed the data they had recovered. But now the Iron Claw knows we are actively seeking these locations. They will be waiting for us. Let them wait, Marcus replied with newfound confidence. They're not dealing with a helpless research team anymore. They're dealing with something new. Indeed, what Marcus and Kealthan had created was something unprecedented in galactic history, a fusion of human determination and alien wisdom that was proving far greater than the sum of its parts. The Iron Claw had faced many enemies over the years, but they had never encountered anything quite like the partnership between a stubborn human mechanic and the last of the star-touched pack. The next archive was located in the Spiral Arms, hidden within a derelict space station that had been drifting in interstellar space for over a century. But first, they needed to make a stop at a black market technology dealer who could provide them with equipment specifically designed to counter Iron Claw surveillance methods. As the rust bucket settled into hyperspace for the journey to their next destination, Marcus reflected on how dramatically his life had changed. 3 weeks ago, he had been a simple salvager content to work alone among the asteroids. Now he found himself part of something larger, something important enough to risk everything for. The transformation wasn't limited to external circumstances. Marcus could feel changes within himself as well, subtle shifts in perception and understanding that seemed to result from his extended proximity to Kealthan and Luparian technology. He was becoming something new, just as their ship had evolved beyond its original specifications. And somewhere in the depths of space, the Iron Claw Syndicate was learning that their hunt for Luparian survivors had become far more complicated than anticipated. 6 months and 4 archives later, Marcus Chen stood on the observation deck of the transformed rust bucket, watching the red giant star of the Kepler 452 system slowly expand across the view screen. They had recovered archives from the Spiral Arms, the dead zone beyond the Galactic Rim, the contested territories of the Sigma Draconis cluster, and the ancient ruins in the Vega system. Each location had taught them more about Luparian science and technology, while also revealing the growing sophistication of the Iron Claw's hunt. The mercenary syndicate had learned from their early encounters, developing new tracking methods and deploying increasingly dangerous assets. What had begun as a simple pursuit had evolved into a galaxy-spanning conflict between 2 very different philosophies of existence. The Iron Claw sought to possess and control knowledge for profit, while Marcus and Kealthan worked to preserve and share it for the benefit of all sentient life. "The final archives are here," Kealthan announced, emerging from the ship's meditation chamber where he had been communing with the consciousness interface. "Hidden within the ruins of the ancient stellar observatory on Kepler 452c. But Marcus, I must warn you, the readings suggest we are not alone in this system." Marcus studied the sensor displays, noting the subtle energy signatures that indicated cloaked vessels. Iron Claw? Worse. These signatures match hegemony warships. The hegemony was the Iron Claw's primary client, a collection of militaristic species that viewed the galaxy as territory to be conquered rather than explored. If they had become directly involved in the hunt for Luparian knowledge, it meant the situation had escalated far beyond simple piracy. "How many ships?" Marcus asked, though he suspected he wouldn't like the answer. "At least 12 vessels, possibly more. They have established a blockade around Kepler 452c, preventing any approach to the planet's surface." Marcus felt a familiar surge of stubborn determination. They had come too far and sacrificed too much to give up now. The final archives contained the most important Luparian research, theoretical frameworks that could revolutionize understanding of consciousness, space-time, and the fundamental nature of reality itself. If that knowledge fell into the hegemony's hands, it would be used to create weapons capable of enslaving entire star systems. We need allies, Marcus concluded. 12 warships is beyond what we can handle alone, even with all our modifications. Kael'than was quiet for a moment, clearly wrestling with some internal decision. There is a possibility, but it would require revealing information that I have kept hidden, even from you. What kind of information? When I told you I was the last of my people, I spoke the truth as I understood it then. But the archives we have recovered contain communication logs from other survivors. I am not alone. The revelation hit Marcus like a physical blow. For 6 months, he had believed they were working to preserve the remnants of an extinct civilization. The idea that other Luparians might still be alive changed everything. How many? Marcus asked quietly. Perhaps a dozen individuals scattered across the galaxy in hiding. They have been living in disguise, afraid to reveal themselves for fear of attracting the Iron Claw's attention. But if I were to send them the locations of the archives we have already recovered, Marcus understood immediately. A dozen Luparian survivors equipped with their people's most advanced technology and united by a common cause could present a very different kind of threat to the hegemony blockade. Do it, Marcus said without hesitation. Kael'than's expression suggested surprise. You understand what you are asking? If my people emerge from hiding to help us, they will never be able to return to obscurity. The galaxy will know that Luparians survived the destruction of our homeworld. Maybe it's time the galaxy knew that, Marcus replied. Maybe it's time your people stopped hiding. The process of contacting the hidden survivors took several hours, during which Marcus worked on modifications to their ship's communication array. The messages had to be carefully coded to avoid interception by hegemony listening posts while still conveying the urgency of their situation and the location of the archive data. The responses, when they came, were immediate and unanimous. Every surviving Luparian agreed to emerge from hiding for this final mission. They would converge on the Kepler Press 452 system within 72 hours, bringing with them ships and weapons that had been hidden since the fall of their homeworld. While they waited for the reinforcements to arrive, Marcus and Kael'than used the time to study the hegemony blockade and plan their approach to the planet's surface. The ancient stellar observatory was built into a mountain range on the planet's northern continent, its location chosen for astronomical observations rather than defensive advantages. The facility extends deep underground, Kael'than explained as they reviewed the architectural plans. The final archive is housed in the central repository, protected by quantum encryption and multiple failsafe systems. Even with biometric access, it will take time to retrieve the data. How much time? At least an hour, possibly 2 if the systems have degraded over the centuries. Marcus studied the tactical situation. An hour was an eternity in combat, especially when facing the kind of firepower the hegemony could bring to bear. They would need to hold off an entire battle fleet while Kael'than worked to recover the archive. The first surviving Luparian ship to arrive was a revelation. The vessel appeared to be grown rather than built, its organic curves and flowing lines making it look more like a deep-sea creature than a spacecraft. When its pilot contacted them, Marcus heard Kael'than's sharp intake of breath. "Zarafine of the Night Hunters," Kael'than whispered. "I thought she died in the evacuation of our homeworld." The reunion between the two Luparians was emotional in ways that transcended species barriers. Even though Marcus couldn't understand the nuances of their communication, he could feel the weight of shared loss and desperate hope that passed between them. These were beings who had believed themselves to be the last remnants of their people, suddenly discovering that they were part of something larger. One by one, the other survivors arrived. Each ship was unique, reflecting the individual modifications and adaptations its pilot had made during months of hiding. Together, they represented a level of technological sophistication that the hegemony had never encountered. The plan they developed was audacious in its simplicity. The Luparian ships would engage the hegemony blockade directly, using their advanced technology and intimate understanding of consciousness-based warfare to create confusion and chaos. Meanwhile, Marcus and Keothan would slip through the distraction in the modified rust bucket, using their ship's hybrid systems to reach the planet's surface undetected. Remember, Zarafin warned as they prepared for the assault, the hegemony will not expect us to fight as a coordinated pack. Use that advantage. Strike fast, strike hard, and trust your packmates to support you. The battle that followed would be remembered in galactic history as the moment when the balance of power began to shift away from militaristic domination toward cooperative exploration. The Luparian ships moved with a fluid grace that defied conventional tactical analysis, their consciousness-linked pilots responding to threats and opportunities with perfect coordination. The hegemony warships were powerful but predictable, their commanders thinking in terms of formation flying and overwhelming firepower. They were completely unprepared for enemies who could anticipate their moves before they made them, who could coordinate attacks without visible communication, who seemed to dance through space as if gravity and inertia were merely suggestions. Marcus watched the battle unfold on his sensors as he guided the rust bucket through the chaos toward the planet's surface. The Luparian ships were outnumbered 3-1, but they were winning through sheer tactical superiority and technological advantage. "They fight like wolves," Marcus murmured in admiration. "We are wolves," Kayla Kenton replied simply. "The Iron Claw and the Hegemony hunt us like prey, but they forget that wolves are also hunters." The approach to Kepler 452c was harrowing despite their stealth systems. Debris from the battle above rained down through the atmosphere, and Marcus had to navigate through a minefield of destroyed hegemony drones and damaged Luparian craft. But the consciousness interface made it possible, allowing Keothan to guide them through obstacles that no conventional pilot could have managed. The ancient stellar observatory was a marvel of architectural engineering, its crystalline spires and flowing courtyards perfectly integrated with the natural mountain landscape. But centuries of abandonment had taken their toll, and Marcus had to use the ship's cutting torches to clear a landing site among the overgrown ruins. The final archive was exactly where Keothan had predicted, housed in a chamber deep beneath the observatory's primary telescope array. The quantum encryption had degraded over time, but the biometric scanners still responded to Keothan's genetic markers. Data began flowing into their storage units, theoretical frameworks, experimental results, philosophical treatises that represented the pinnacle of Luparian scientific achievement. This knowledge, Keothan breathed as the download proceeded, it could change everything. Consciousness transfer, reality manipulation, the fundamental equations that govern space-time itself. My people spent millennia developing these concepts, but their stolen time was running out. The hegemony had detected their presence on the planet's surface and was deploying ground forces to the observatory. Marcus could hear the sound of atmospheric craft approaching, their engines growing louder with each passing moment. "How much longer?" he asked, checking the charge on his cutting torch. 10 minutes, maybe 15 if the quantum buffers hold. The first hegemony soldiers to reach the archive chamber found Marcus waiting for them with makeshift barricades and an intimate knowledge of the observatory's layout. The ancient building became a maze of tactical advantages, each corridor and stairway offering opportunities for ambush and delay. But there were too many of them, and Marcus was forced to give ground steadily. By the time Keothan announced that the download was complete, they were pinned down in the archive chamber with hegemony forces controlling every exit. "Emergency evacuation?" Marcus asked hopefully. "No quantum displacement devices remaining," Keothan replied grimly. "But I have something else. Something I have been saving for this moment." The device Keothan produced was unlike anything Marcus had seen before, a crystalline construct that seemed to bend light around itself, creating impossible geometries in the space around his hands. "Reality anchor," Keothan explained. "It will create a temporary discontinuity in local space-time, allowing us to step outside conventional physics long enough to escape. But Marcus, I must warn you, the process will change you permanently. You will no longer be entirely human." Marcus thought about the journey they had shared, the knowledge they had preserved, the partnership they had forged between two species that shouldn't have been able to understand each other. He thought about his grandmother's words about being judged by how you treat the helpless and realized that somewhere along the way he had become something more than just a salvager. "Do it," he said. The activation of the reality anchor was unlike anything Marcus had ever experienced. For a moment that seemed to last forever, he existed outside the normal flow of time and space, aware of connections between all things that usually remained hidden. He could feel Kael'than's consciousness beside his own, and beyond that the minds of the other Luparians fighting in space above. When reality reasserted itself, they were standing in the observation lounge of Zaraphine's ship, watching the final hegemony vessels retreat from the system. The battle was over, and they had won more than just a military victory. They had proven that cooperation could triumph over domination, that knowledge shared was more powerful than knowledge hoarded. "The archives?" Marcus asked, his voice sounding strange to his own ears. "All recovered," Kael'than confirmed. "Every piece of Luparian knowledge has been preserved, but more importantly, my people are no longer hiding. We can begin the work of rebuilding our civilization with humanity as our partners." Marcus looked at his hands and saw that they were subtly different, the fingers slightly longer, the skin bearing faint patterns that hadn't been there before. The reality anchor had indeed changed him, making him something new, not fully human, not Luparian, but something unprecedented. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now we share what we have learned," Kael'than replied. "The knowledge in these archives will benefit every species in the galaxy, human and alien alike. And the partnership we have forged will serve as a model for cooperation between species that might otherwise never have found common ground." The transformation was already beginning. Within days, news of the Luparian survivors spread throughout the galaxy, along with announcements of technological breakthroughs that would revolutionize medicine, space travel, and understanding of consciousness itself. The Iron Claw Syndicate found themselves facing prosecution by a united coalition of species who had grown tired of their predatory practices. And at the center of it all was the unlikely partnership between a stubborn human mechanic and the last wolf of the stars, proving that sometimes the most extraordinary changes begin with the simple decision to help someone in need. Marcus Chen had set out to salvage scrap metal from an asteroid field. Instead, he had helped salvage the future of galactic civilization itself. It was, he reflected, a pretty good day's work.